Welcome to our World Heritage 2021 debate. 2021 debate is a year of events focused on protection, conservation, and management of World Heritage. We want to uncover untold stories to broaden our views on heritage practices and future perspectives. Knowledge gathered this year will be published in 2022 on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the Convention. The Our World Heritage Initiative is created by individuals working on 100% voluntary capacity. We would like to point out that Our World Heritage provides an open dialogue platform that is based on voluntary work of session organizers and speakers. Our World Heritage welcomes diverse viewpoints in the spirit of collegial debate where mutual respect is afforded to all. Please note that the expressed views do not necessarily reflect the official position of Our World Heritage. We thank today's speakers for telling their stories, and we thank you, the listeners, for your kind interest and questions. If you want to remain up to date on our activities, you can follow our social media. We maintain channels in multiple languages to break through the language barriers and connect to local communities. You will find all links on our website, ourworldheritage.org. Thank you for being with us today, and we wish you a very fruitful event. Welcome to our World Heritage 2021 debate. 2021 debate is a year of events focused on protection, conservation, and management of World Heritage. We want to uncover untold stories to broaden our views on heritage practices and future perspectives. Knowledge gathered this year will be published in 2022 on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the Convention. The Our World Heritage Initiative is created by individuals working on 100% voluntary capacity. We would like to point out that Our World Heritage provides an open dialogue platform that is based on voluntary work of session organizers and speakers. Our World Heritage welcomes diverse viewpoints in the spirit of collegial debate where mutual respect is afforded to all. Please note that the expressed views do not necessarily reflect the official position of Our World Heritage. We thank today's speakers for telling their stories, and we thank you, the listeners, for your kind interest and questions. If you want to remain up to date on our activities, you can follow our social media. We maintain channels in multiple languages to break through the language barriers and connect to local communities. You will find all links on our website, ourworldheritage.org. Thank you for being with us today, and we wish you a very fruitful event. Welcome to our World Heritage 2021 debate. 2021 debate is a year of events focused on protection, conservation, and management of World Heritage. We want to uncover untold stories to broaden our views on heritage practices and future perspectives. Knowledge gathered this year will be published in 2022 on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the Convention. The Our World Heritage Initiative is created by individuals working on 100% voluntary capacity. We would like to point out that Our World Heritage provides an open dialogue platform that is based on voluntary work of session organizers and speakers. Our World Heritage welcomes diverse viewpoints in the spirit of collegial debate where mutual respect is afforded to all. Please note that the expressed views do not necessarily reflect the official position of Our World Heritage. We thank today's speakers for telling their stories, and we thank you, the listeners, for your kind interest and questions. If you want to remain up to date on our activities, you can follow our social media. We maintain channels in multiple languages to break through the language barriers and connect to local communities. You will find all links on our website, ourworldheritage.org. Thank you for being with us today, and we wish you a very fruitful event. Welcome to our World Heritage 2021 debate. 2021 debate is a year of events focused on protection, conservation, and management of World Heritage. We want to uncover untold stories to broaden our views on heritage practices and future perspectives. Knowledge gathered this year will be published in 2022 on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the Convention. The Our World Heritage Initiative is created by individuals working on 100% voluntary capacity. We would like to point out that Our World Heritage provides an open dialogue platform that is based on voluntary work of session organizers and speakers. Our World Heritage welcomes diverse viewpoints in the spirit of collegial debate where mutual respect is afforded to all. Please note that the expressed views do not necessarily reflect the official position of Our World Heritage. We thank today's speakers for telling their stories, and we thank you, the listeners, for your kind interest and questions. If you want to remain up to date on our activities, you can follow our social media. We maintain channels in multiple languages to break through the language barriers and connect to local communities. You will find all links on our website, ourworldheritage.org. Thank you for being with us today, and we wish you a very fruitful event. Welcome to our World Heritage 2021 debate. 2021 debate is a year of events focused on protection, conservation, and management of World Heritage. We want to uncover untold stories to broaden our views on heritage practices and future perspectives. Knowledge gathered this year will be published in 2022 on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the Convention. The Our
Okay. Daniel, you
Yeah.
are already on, yes, live.
Sorry?
We are already live, so we can start now.
Yeah, they told me that they need few moments to start the movie. We are just waiting.
No, I think the movie was already launched, so we can start.
I didn't see. So we start now. Okay, so we start a session on integrity and authenticity with two distinguished speakers, Dina Bahoum from Cairo. She's an engineer and art historian with a thesis on conservation and especially authenticity at Paris 1. And Rosanne Piccolo, who is a researcher and is technical director in the Department of Historic Preservation in São Paulo in Brazil. The subject of this session deals with the two concepts that are fundamental in the World Heritage system. Authenticity and integrity are two conditions that should be met by the World Heritage property in order to be deemed to have an outstanding universal value. But in reality, integrity and authenticity are more in general, the requirements for a monument or a site or an urban ensemble or even a natural site to be considered as a heritage feature. They are deeply rooted in the culture of heritage and conservation. However, these definitions are rather controversial to many extent. The definitions provided by the operational guidelines concerning the World Heritage properties, in my opinion, open the way to different and often contradictory interpretations that lead to question about the appropriateness and the relevance of these conditions, not only for the purpose of description in the World Heritage List, but more in general for the identification of heritage to be protected and the definition of the conservation and the management strategies. And this opinion has been developed through several experiences I did, mostly in the field and not only. But I want to say that as for the condition of authenticity, for instance, should the status of heritage be denied to many reconstructions of archaeological remains or historic buildings or districts that have been implemented through history in all the countries without the basis of a complete and detailed documentation and only on the basis of conjectural hypotheses or creative interpretations? I would like to mention that many parts of the Roman Forum, the Palace of Knossos in Crete, the city of Carcassonne by Viollet-le-Duc, they are not authentic in a way, if we consider the definition given by the operational guidelines. Yet they are extremely popular and they are worldwide recognized as heritage features. And also I would like to consider the many sites of earth and architecture that are continuously rebuilt on the basis of local know-how and traditions without any historical detailed documentations, only on the basis of memories and only on the basis of local know-how. So in recent years, in many countries, there is a very strong movement towards the reinvention of the heritage. I would like to mention many countries in the Gulf, for instance, or even in China, where parts of cities and parts of historical ensembles are completely rebuilt from the scratch. Are these authentic or not? Nobody doubts that there are heritage sites, but their authenticity has to be demonstrated. As for the integrity, the definition and description criteria provided by the operational guidelines are maybe more clear and more effective. They take into consideration the natural heritage with accurate recommendations about the criteria to be used for the different categories. Whilst for the cultural heritage, these criteria introduce the notion of wholeness that seems to be more subject to subjective and ad hoc interpretations. Thus, in the aim of this session is to review and discuss the concept of authenticity and integrity to better frame their use in the definition and implementation of conservation strategies, particularly for living heritage such as historical cities or natural heritage under heavy environmental changes, threatened by heavy environmental changes and development pressure. We have here to discuss two specialists in the field because the thesis of Dina, I think, deals mainly with the notion of authenticity. She developed a thesis on the work of the, sorry, I forgot, the Comité, yes, the Egyptian Comité that in the late 19th century defined, let's say, the conditions and the conservation strategies for the Egyptian heritage. And Rosanna, who, as far as seen on the internet, has developed a thesis. In her thesis, developed the concept of integrity in particular. And I think that the two of you are absolutely complementary. So I leave you the floor, and we will discuss these two very controversial concepts. I will give the floor to Dina Bakum first. So Dina, please.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Daniele, for the introduction. Thank you and Monica for inviting me to participate in this initiative and to present today in this session on integrity and authenticity. So, although the meaning of authenticity finds its roots in being principled, genuine, original, true, not fake, it is really a difficult question, especially in the context of World Heritage. It's actually a notion and a concept that has been evolving and developing. It is one that is actually, like you said, Danielle, contested, very much debated, especially in relation to questions linked to reconstruction, especially in relation to questions of the tangible and the intangible. I would say also it can be a very philosophical thing. But having said that, I do still believe that it's a very important and significant concept in the context of World Heritage. And I think we need to ask why. Why is authenticity important? Why have we been debating it for a very long time? And I think one of the reasons for this is that it's very much linked to the holistic understanding of the property, and it's very much linked to the conservation approaches. I also think our responsibility towards authenticity can clearly be seen in the Venice Charter, where it's mentioned in the preamble, and I quote, "Imbued with a message from the past, the historic monuments of generation of people remain to the present day as living witnesses of their old age traditions. People are becoming more and more conscious of the unity of human values and regard ancient monuments as a common heritage. The common responsibility to safeguard them for future generations is recognized. It is our duty to hand them on in the full richness of their authenticity." Now, today, in the context of World Heritage, authenticity is among the conditions, like you mentioned, that should be met for a property to be deemed of outstanding universal value. And as noted, the notion of authenticity has evolved over the years. In fact, several prominent World Heritage experts have written extensively and intensively on the history of authenticity, its development, the influence the concept had in several regions. And here, I am only giving in this part a very brief introduction of the different milestones. I'm sure that many of you are very much familiar with these, with this history, but I thought this would be important for the wider audience. Then in the second part of my presentation, I will present some case studies from Egypt that we could use hopefully as a base for the discussion on the way forward. What can we do? So to remind everybody, authenticity in the context of World Heritage, it was actually not mentioned in the 1972 Convention concerning the protection of the World Cultural and Natural Heritage, also known to everybody as the World Heritage Convention. Nevertheless, in the operational guidelines for the implementation of the World Heritage Convention that appeared in 1977, paragraph 9 states that in addition, the property should meet the test of authenticity in design, materials, workmanship, and setting. And authenticity does not limit consideration to original form and structure, but includes subsequent modifications and additions over the course of time, which in themselves possess artistic or historic value. That was a bit modified in the 1980 operational guidelines, and here the point of reconstruction was added. And mentioning that the committee considered that reconstruction is only if it is carried out on the basis of complete and detailed documentation on the original and to no extent on conjecture. Now, of course, reconstruction has been a major issue in relation to these whole debates that developed in the late 1970s and early 1980s. And just to give one example, we have the Historic Center of Warsaw, which was inscribed in 1980 and which has been heavily reconstructed after World War II. And in relation to this, we have Michel Parent in the third session of the World Heritage Committee that took place in 1979 in Luxor, to stress that authenticity is relative and depends on the nature of the property involved. A wooden temple in Kyoto, which has been perfectly maintained and whose timbers have been replaced regularly as and when they decay without any alterations of the architecture or of the look of the material over 10 centuries, remains undeniably authentic. The nature of the material, its finishing, its structural use, and its expressive use, the very nature of the civilization which built the heritage, are all different factors according to which the... So of course, indeed, Japan and the Japanese heritage has played a major role in the development of the notion of authenticity, with the issuance of the Nara document on authenticity in 1994. And after that, several conferences and meetings and debates have taken place in different regions of the world, discussing specifically issues that were mentioned in the Nara document of authenticity, which has stressed on cultural diversity, the importance of taking care of the cultural context, the respect for the tangible and intangible expressions of different cultures and societies, and also the responsibilities towards the cultural communities, and as well as the adherence to the international charters. Mentioning also that conservation of cultural heritage in all its forms and historic periods is required. So we see then in 2005, and only in 2005, the notions and the concepts and the ideas that were developed in the Nara document on authenticity being reflected in the operational guidelines, or in the revised operational guidelines of 2005, as you can see here, and also in article 80, in paragraph 82, where also it is mentioned, and I will read again, that depending on the type of cultural heritage and its cultural context, properties may be understood to meet the conditions of authenticity if their cultural values, as recognized in the nomination criteria proposed, are truthfully and credibly expressed through a variety of attributes, including, so here you can see that it's different from the operational guidelines of 1977. So it's not only form and design, it's material and substance, it's also use and function, traditions, techniques, and management systems, location and settings, which we had before, language and other forms of intangible heritage, spirit and feeling, and other internal and external factors. So now, after this a bit long introduction, I will use some examples of living heritage sites in Egypt, of Islamic monuments, as well as Coptic, that is Christian Egyptian heritage, to discuss actually the complexity of the notion of the authenticity, and to just shed some light on the need for new directions regarding how to really practically deal with this notion on the ground, for sites that are either inscribed on the World Heritage List or others to be nominated for inscriptions. As we know, with several living heritage sites, these have diverse values and attributes that carry these values and their authenticity. And while important aspect of their authenticity lies actually in the spirit, in the use of these monuments, these very same values manifest themselves very much through the artistic and architectural values. They are actually spaces where the intangible and the tangible meet very much. One important aspect actually of Egypt's Islamic monument is that they were endowed structures under a system called the Waqf or the Awqaf. And in the essence of this Waqf system was to maintain regularly the buildings and their material fabric. And the purpose of this was actually to keep the benefit for the users in perpetuity. But what I would like to highlight here is that two things actually. The first is that this system already, since the historic period or the medieval period, acknowledged the value of the materiality of the building, but also a very important aspect of it was the benefit for the users. Moreover, we could consider it actually as a traditional maintenance system. It is not very much capitalized on, and I think that many of my colleagues in Egypt and also others, other international colleagues who have worked on historic Cairo, a World Heritage Site as well, known to many of you, I believe, would agree that we need to contextualize the system. We need to capitalize also more on its value. But because many of these buildings were so important and so valuable for the people, over the centuries, they have been expanded, they have been changed, they have been maybe altered with, but the authenticity of their use remained. Sometimes I would also argue maybe in different forms, but the essence of the use and of this value remained. But they became also architectural palimpsests, and their understanding would only be complete, let's say, if we understand all these different layers that they have, but also their continuous use and functions. When it comes to Coptic heritage, I would just give the example of Christian monasticism, where actually its origins can be traced back to Egypt and also to Syria. So in Egypt, several monasteries were built all over the country. These monasteries, despite of damage, change, expansions, and so on, continue to be important places for monasticism, but also for the wider community who continue to visit them and pray and use them. And again, these, like several Islamic monuments over the century, because of their use, they were changed. Some paintings were overpainted, and they continue to change, but at the same time to be conserved. Now, of course, change is continuous, and sometimes the intervention, be it repair, restoration, reconstruction, was simply a result of a very pragmatic and needed event, like, for example, natural damage or general decay or earthquakes. And this have also created the need for intervention, and also in effect created architectural and urban palimpsests of the city that have been conserving parts of the authenticity of these buildings while changing also others. So accordingly, in the 19th century, and that was the topic of my dissertation, I've dealt with a committee that was established in the late 19th century called Comité de Conservation des Monuments de l'Art Arabe, or لجنة حفظ الآثار العربية. It was established, interestingly, under the Ministry of Awqaf for a number of reasons that I will not go into their details at the moment, but what I would like to highlight is one of the reasons possibly for their foundation under the Ministry of Endowments and under the Ministry of Awqaf is really an indication that they have considered the essence of the Waqf system as a maintenance and repair system. So in my PhD dissertation, I have questioned whether these interventions carried out by the committee could be considered today from the art historical perspective as or, and I have argued that actually the layer that the committee has put on these monuments, the way those who were involved interpreted these monuments and interpreted their authenticity is very important. I would say that it's not enough today to say, oh, this is a modern intervention that was done as part of a restoration, and to stop here. I have argued that the analysis of this layer is actually an indispensable endeavor if we want to understand these monuments, their modern as well as their historic layers, if we want to understand their authenticity. So basically what I very briefly have attempted to highlight here is giving examples of living heritage where arguably like several living heritage worldwide have been changed, have been expanded, restored over time. Their material fabric might have changed, even the function might have changed. And I can give several examples where, for example, in Islamic monuments, there is, for example, the sabil, where people used to get water for free, while with modernization, the sabil doesn't function anymore as a place where people would get water because they get it in a different way. So the function in certain ways has slightly changed. Or in monasteries where they used to press oil or produce several things with certain machines that are now historic and out of date, but the essence of their efforts to work while they are monks still remains. And what I tried to show is that what actually led to the change of the fabric of many of these buildings is actually that they kept having value for different interest groups. These interest groups could, or maybe we call them stakeholders, could be sometimes the people who used the places themselves, but there are also a wider group of people also interested in the art. And I think these are one of the reasons why certain elements of authenticity and certain aspects of authenticity of these structures remain to be conserved today. I'm putting pressure here again on certain aspects because I think we can argue that every cultural site and property has probably over time lost some aspects of its authenticity, but remained many others. And it is hence important to try to understand these diverse groups of values and what carries the authenticity. Before ending, I would just like to place some of the other paragraphs in the operational guidelines linked to authenticity. I'm not going to read them now, but I do think that the operational guideline provide a very good base for discussing the way forward. What I think is needed is to see how can we practically not only in theory, apply some of the ideas mentioned in the operational guidelines. In my opinion, there is definitely a need to discuss the ideas and the notions and concepts of authenticity beyond the World Heritage Centers. We need to explain to the wider community what the process of the evolution of this concept. We need to take this whole idea to the wider community. And of course, with wider community, I mean the local community, but not only the local community, I mean also other experts in different fields that we're dealing with, like art historians, for example, and several other groups. Therefore, I think we need to approach it in an interdisciplinary manner, through a holistic approach. I think I come back here to the question of why. Why is it that the question of authenticity is important? I think because when we start to ask questions linked to authenticity, it enriches our understanding of these complex sites. And I think, again, the notion of authenticity and discussing it and dealing with it is a responsibility. It's a responsibility that we carry towards the future generation. It's important to be faithful and truthful. So having said that, I would just like to end here by concluding that I have just given a very fast glimpse on certain complexities of the notion of authenticities. There are several other questions that we could discuss, like sites where material fabric does not exist anymore, but still the places themselves carry values because of certain events, because of certain histories. There is the question of sites already inscribed on the World Heritage List, and where there is a need to re-understand their authenticity, because when they were initially inscribed, this was not well defined. We need to discuss authenticity of function, of use, because in many of the buildings, although the main buildings remain to be used, certain functions have changed. So I leave these for the future discussion, and I hope we can address them in the session at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dina. I think that your historical overview was very interesting, and your conclusion leaves some points for discussion. I think that the intervention of Rosanne, Piccolo or Piccolo? Because sometimes I see your name with 2 L and sometimes with 1.
It's Piccolo. Just
Piccolo.
with 1 L. It's
1 L. Okay.
One. It's not okay here.
Italian.
Okay. In Italia, see.
Okay. So I give you the floor.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me share my presentation with you. Oh, it's not in the first one. Okay, I'm starting saying thank you so much, Daniele and Monica, for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about my PhD dissertation at USP. And today I'm hoping to give you an overview of my research on integrity and authenticity in the World Heritage context. And the central focus of the discussion is the technical and political administrative aspects of these concepts, as well as their appropriation by UNESCO, would lead us to the perception that we are dealing with a really controversial pair, as Daniele told us. And the World Heritage System is formed by UNESCO and its constitutive bodies, ICAMOS, ICRAM, and IUCN. And the current practice of UNESCO is based on the 1972 World Heritage Convention. It was centered on 2 main ideas. Firstly, the protection and transmission of heritage through international actions. And secondly, the existence of an outstanding universal value, called OUV, that can be attributed to properties that fulfill a pre-established criteria. And so the judgment of what constitutes the World Heritage, it's linked to natural and cultural meanings that express the OUV and also to the conditions of authenticity and integrity of the property. And although these concepts are widely used in several fields of knowledge, and UNESCO has specific understandings of them, according to this current OP guide, properties may be understood to meet the conditions of authenticity if their cultural values are truthfully and credibly expressed through a variety of attributes that's listed below. That is, it seems quite difficult for something to be considered authentic by UNESCO. And on the other hand, integrity is a measure of the wholeness and intactness of the natural and or cultural heritage and its attributes. Although apparently sedimented definitions, there are huge disagreements and misunderstandings related to these two concepts. And the general critics about them are related to the imposition of criteria for defining what is heritage in different cultural contexts, and what leads to the harmonization of the understanding of this heritage. And besides the fact they are restricted and nebulous concepts where decisions seems to be more diplomatic than technical based. And as a direct consequence of it, we have an overvaluation of some types of properties and a controversial World Heritage list as a result. And then so much is questioned about the evaluation of nominations, and we realize that there are two general trends involving authenticity and integrity. A literal interpretation of these concepts that results in a restricted selection, and another figurative interpretation in which authenticity and integrity are worked out in a shallow way, allowing the most multiple results in evaluations. So this all led me to the question, what are the technical and political administrative origins of the concepts of authenticity and integrity? And my intention was not to do a witch hunt or a finger pointing, but I just intended to denaturalize both concepts, understanding them according to the condition of historical beings. And in order to answer that question, it was necessary to understand the context of the creation of UNESCO. And UNESCO was founded in 1945 with the purpose of promoting peace and security through actions related to education, science, and culture. And within this great objective, there was an intention to protect works of art and monuments. And starting in 1949, they began to create specific bodies and committees to address issues of interest to UNESCO. And so it came the International Committee of Monuments, the first division to deal with heritage matters. And this group stood out for the high level of the intellectual debate, strongly driven by the questions posed in the field of preservation after the second post-war, as already stated in her presentation. And thus, the first UNESCO systems of heritage preservation were carried out from specific demands. But this scenario started to change after the beginning of the international campaign to save the Busenberg Monument. It was located in the Nubia region of Egypt. The construction of Aswan Dam has threatened the permanence of many ancient buildings. And this campaign gave UNESCO great visibility, and it was responsible for raising financial and technical assistance for that country. Despite the success of the Busenberg campaign, the criticism of UNESCO focused on great and ancient monuments began. And it was precisely at that moment that the concepts of authenticity and integrity began to circulate on UNESCO's backstage, since they appeared in the Venice Charter and started to be discussed inside ICOMOS, a major contributor to UNESCO. And the increased request of international aid led UNESCO to deepen the discussions about the standard of its institutional action. And four alternatives were considered. One, UNESCO would be a sort of Red Cross for monuments, groups of buildings and sites of universal value in imminent danger. And this option was strongly inspired by the Busenberg experience. Two, UNESCO would be responsible for the composition of a World Monuments list based on indications of member states, which seems very suitable. 3, UNESCO would conduct a trust for World Heritage to identify and manage the natural and scenic wonders of the world. And 4, UNESCO would self-proclaim an international protection authority in order to establish a World Heritage list based on its own criteria. This was the most controversial alternative because UNESCO would have the single competence for defining the World Heritage in all countries around the world. Even so, it was a chosen alternative. But to carry out this ambitious project, it was necessary to establish a common basis for understanding between UNESCO and its 120 member states by the end of the 60s. And 2 measures were adopted: the establishment of a major regulation that was the World Heritage Convention that happened in 1972, and the creation of its own concepts in order to characterize and select the international heritage. Thus, the definition of its own terminology and the standardization of the concepts was the central goal to be achieved. And despite its noble intention, UNESCO's line of action was severely criticized, and one of the most eloquent demonstrations was given by Paul Philippot when he said, "The identification of meanings does not depend on the fulfillment of pre-established criteria, but rather on the progress around the development of historical awareness and the culture of the people involved. From a modern point of view, it is possible to oscillate values from one nation to another. In fact, this fluctuation sufficiently justified at a time when the meaning of the past is actually relative to people who recognize it as their past. Another way of considering universal values would constitute a pure abstraction. Therefore, the first step is to establish an inventory of what should be conserved. It is necessary to define the criteria for recognition of creative quality and the impact of the object on human consciousness. And such criteria, of course, are never crystallized into fixed rules, but will reflect the development related to the culture of each country. And so the World Heritage System was formed, and to apply for a place on the list, states parties should access the convention. And the first country to do this was the United States of America. And this early moment of the convention was marked by countries' lack of interest on it. Even so, the studies to define the nomination processes continued. And a really important moment on this discussion took place at the 1976 March meeting, in which the 3 advisory bodies took part. ICOMOS suggested the adoption of 6 criteria of exceptionality in order to evaluate the OUV of the property, in addition to meeting the conditions of integrity. And integrity should be expressed through the analysis of setting, design, materials, workmanship, function, condition, and environment. It's really, really interesting to realize that this understanding of integrity was highly inspired by the U.S. National Park Service politics, which also required the condition of integrity in order to register a historic place. The IUCN suggested the election of few natural elements to compose the list. This was motivated by the great emphasis on the resources that would be necessary to manage the natural heritage on the list. Thus, IUCN argued that the list of natural heritage should be restricted to those few areas of true international significance. Therefore, 4 criteria of natural exceptionality have been proposed, in addition to meeting the condition of integrity. And this condition would be linked to the dimension and completeness of property, like the evaluations of the ecological integrity of natural ecosystems. And thus, integrity would ensure that the areas in the list were superlative and untouched. However, at the final revision of the OPGI text, Raymond Lemay suggests the use of the term authenticity instead of integrity in the case of cultural heritage. He claimed that authenticity was a better known concept at Europe. In addition, Lemaitre felt that idea of originality associated with the concept of American integrity should be countered. And after all, ruins should also be included in the list. And UNESCO defended the need of heritage authentication, such as the work of art, so that attributes could be considered credible. Thus, the condition of integrity of cultural heritage, assessed from 7 points, was automatically transformed into authenticity, accessed from just 4 elements: design, setting, materials, and workmanship. Integrity was required for natural heritage, but it was not conceptualized in 1977. Thus, the word heritage should be exceptional, authentic in the case of cultural heritage, and integral in the case of natural properties. This situation has remained unchanged for many, many years until the anniversary of the convention in 1992, when UNESCO started a comprehensive study to assess the representativeness of its systems in order to fill the gaps in the list. And many strategies were considered, like reviewing the notion of integrity, combating the notion of work of art implicit in the cultural criteria, making integrity a criterion for cultural heritage, and adopting the category of cultural landscape. And it was understood that the lack of the balance in the list was largely linked with the condition of integrity. And therefore, there were a new but unsuccessful attempt to conceptualize it. And this happened in parallel to the ratification of the importance of authenticity in 1994 NATA document, now understood in it in the light of specific values, specific cultural values, what did not happen like this before. And one of the most important initiatives promoted by UNESCO to discuss the concepts of integrity and authenticity in order to make them clear, it was the African meeting. And the results of this debate would also provide inputs for changing the operational guidelines. And from the discussion of many experts, it was concluded that the adoption of authenticity as a World Heritage qualifier was hampered by linguistic barriers. And many groups were at the heart of the problem of how cultures organize words and things. And an interesting example was given by Olabi Babalola Yai. I'm sorry for my pronunciation. And this researcher stressed that it is known that Eskimos have no word for snow, although they have 20 odd words that used to describe different varieties of snow according to how it's perceived. And so can anyone therefore possibly say that they don't have a precise expression for snow? On the other side, the adoption of integrity in UNESCO evaluation processes seemed to be the most problematic issue. For African experts, integrity means arbitrary limits, strongly associated to technical management capacity, which often led to an ecological apartheid. And these criticals were based on many case studies that were brought to discussion during the meeting. What I found the most interesting about them is the case of the Victoria Falls. The falls are located on the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe. And in 1989, they were inscribed on the list because this beauty and odd geomorphological processes. These were the main elements considered to make this site a World Heritage Site. And however, in the recognition processes, many important aspects for local population were completely disregarded. It happened because they did not meet the criteria of natural exceptionality and the condition of integrity. So I'd like to read some words from African experts about this. And the Victoria Falls and the rainforest were gazetted as a monument. And when the perimeter fence was erected, the authorities excluded from the area the fenced monument, a baobab tree nearby known as the Big Tree. The Big Tree served as a ritual shrine for local communities for traditional rainmaking and propitiation ceremonies. The Victoria Falls has intangible cultural attributes that were largely ignored when the site was nominated. There's a deep spiritual and cultural connection between people who were displaced from the Victoria Falls area and the Zambezi River, the waterfall and the big tree. At Victoria Falls, however, the local people can only perform spiritual activities clandestinely because the law regards them as intruders on the site. The law does not recognize or respect their traditional custodianship. Few years later, integrity was conceptualized in the new version of the OP guide, and the African appeal was not considered. In the official understanding of integrity, this qualifier was mainly related to physical matters. With this, UNESCO was even accused of serving the interests of countries that invested in policies of vast national parks. And in 2005, another big transformation occurred. The criteria of cultural and natural exceptionality were united in a single set, although the contents of them have not changed. And integrity started to be required for evaluation of cultural properties. Despite the change, the assessments of integrity still remain a black box, continue to these days. Sometimes they are non-existent, sometimes they are inaccurate, playing a poor role in the process of setting the World Heritage List. And then this brings me to the end of my presentation, where we could realize, consider the concepts of authenticity and integrity, that most of heritage transformations are often treated as unwanted processes. It is quite problematic since it disregards material mutability and the expected modification of objects' significance. And in this perspective, UNESCO's authenticity and integrity are more related to a given physical constitution than as a quality linked to the ability to convey and express cultural and natural meanings. And we can perceive that no concept is innocent. The supposedly neutral authenticity and integrity once were coated with institutional purposes. And this is not a single case. We know that technical and political administrative aspects of all concepts are always inextricably associated. But what we should be aware of refers to the international replication of concepts without questioning the relevance of using them to protect our heritage. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. Very interesting conclusion in particular. And I think there is a lot of discussion about your both presentations. And well, I open the floor to the participants and to the spectators. There are to the attendees of this session to ask questions. If there is nobody asking question, I would like to open the discussion. I have a few remarks. No remarks. I agree with your presentation in general. I think that there are some questions that remain open. The first one to me is both concepts of authenticity and integrity refers to an idea of heritage that still looks at heritage as a work of art, as a unique work of art or masterpiece and so on, which of course cannot be an efficient criteria in the light of the widening of the notion of heritage. I am an urban planner, for instance, and I'm dealing with historic cities. What does it mean in the case of an historic city, of an inhabited historic city, is that changes continually. It has to change to remain alive. Otherwise, it will become an archaeological site. In this case, authenticity and integrity has to be defined in a different way. I don't think that the criteria that have been given by the operational guidelines, particularly for the authenticity, are effective to define the authenticity of an historic urban fabric. for instance. Second question, I noted that there is a confusion between authenticity and integrity, as Rosanna pointed out. I think that this depends very much on the interpretation which was given by Raymond Lemaire at a certain moment. He said that integrity and authenticity are more or less the same. In reality, the definition given by the operational guideline are not the same at all, are very much different. And I think that especially authenticity conveys the idea that, as Rosanne says in this conclusion, every transformation to heritage is an unwanted, undesirable process, a process that has to be avoided. Now, I understand that in some cases it could be avoided. In other cases, it cannot be avoided if we want to keep the truth, let's say, of, I do prefer these words maybe to authenticity, the truth of the heritage feature. So this confusion, I think it's very dangerous, and it has to be, in a way, eliminated or clarified. Third, on the basis of my professional experience, I noticed that these two concepts have been institutionalized, particularly by ICOMOS and probably also by IUCN, I don't know, and become a sort of a barrier, you know, to accept any process of change in the heritage fabric, in the physical fabric, and also they prevent any real link between the physical fabric and the intangible meaning, the intangible values of an heritage site. Well, these are the three main points I make, and I would like to know what is your opinion about that, and also I would like to hear the opinion of some attendees. There are many attendees that maybe could give an interesting insight in this discussion. I would give you back the floor in the same order if nobody talks. So Dina, if you can add something to your presentation, and then Rosanne.
Well, as I have tried to show, I mean, the only constant that we have is change. So things.
Sorry, Dina, just sorry, I interrupt you. You showed the Al-Azhar Mosque.
Yes.
I saw the Al-Azhar Mosque the first time in my life 40 years ago.
Yeah.
It was under restoration. And they were completely replacing all the columns. And later on, 10 years ago, I saw the original columns of the Al-Azhar Mosque in the park, the archaeological park next to the Fostat, behind Fostat. And I asked myself, is the Al-Azhar Mosque authentic? Because of course it has been rebuilt probably with the same shape as before, but a lot of the materials, a lot of the decorations and so on have been totally replaced. I had other similar experiences, but since you showed the Al-Azhar
No,
Mosque.
I just showed it. I showed specifically the Azhar Mosque because, yes, as you said, it continues to be restored till today. And it continues to have, on the other hand, a very significant value historically,
sure,
and religiously till today. So
no doubt.
Yeah, so that's why I also said that authenticity is philosophical. We have the example, you know, like we have several examples in that regard, like many that were discussed. If you change the ship of Theos, if you change the one element and of the boat, and over time, all the material has been changed. And Yuka Yokiletto discusses this a lot. In fact, is it the same authentic ship? And that's why I think it depends very much on the lens that we are looking at. And it's very much linked to the value. And I think for me, what is maybe the paradoxical thing here is that we often mention that authenticity is relative. It's relative to the context, to the cultural background, to the diversities, but the World Heritage properties have an outstanding universal value. So you have relative authenticity for an outstanding universal value. So what I believe is that we need to be honest in whatever, as conservation specialist. You know that I myself, I'm a conservation specialist. I've been involved in practical and a lot of restorations of mosques. And what I believe is very important is that every intervention is conveyed to the future generations, that you let the buildings talk for themselves. And either by documenting the change that as a conservation specialist you have done, or documenting it also either on the building itself, or which actually, in fact, this committee, the committee has done, or also through the publication of it. So I think among the important things of authenticity is that we don't lose the information. I think many people, when they visit a place, now, for example, function. Many historic buildings are reused. And when people enter, yes, they will feel part of the aspects of the authenticity of the space because of maybe the material fabric. But another aspect of this authenticity and of the value of this place has been lost. So I think the important thing is to convey whatever change in an honest manner, like you said.
Yeah, we agree. Okay. Yeah. So what is important is to integrate the concept of the process of change and so on in the concept of authenticity and integrity. Otherwise, these two criteria are simply abstract and bureaucratic. That's my point. Rosanna? Rosanne. No, not
Rosanne. I will comment quickly the 3 points you said it here. There has always been a tendency at UNESCO to value great monuments, treating them as work of arts in case of cultural heritage, or as an special phenomenon in case of natural heritage. And this trend was completely transposed to the concepts of authenticity and integrity. So authenticity and integrity always have been related to this big and outstanding heritage, because it is inside the spirit of the convention text. We have some advances, especially after the publication of the NARA document, but we still have a major trend of evaluating the big heritage around the world. Because of this, many properties cannot integrate the list because they are not big enough for UNESCO's criteria. And I agree with you that authenticity and integrity are intertwined concepts. I think because of its unique origin, when it was discussed during the elaboration of the OP guide texts. And so this leads to confusion between them until today. And it's really, they are really tricky concepts. And finally, and the issue of authenticity and integrity, understanding interventions as frequently as unwanted processes. And I think it's linked to the fact that authenticity and integrity are related to the outstanding universal value and not the values given by the local community. So authenticity and integrity, according to the UNESCO understanding, they keep to maintain the existence of that exceptional value. And it creates a lot of managing problems because sometimes it's an artificial value. Sometimes it makes sense just for a small body of specialists, not the community that are regularly involved with them.
Yes, thank you. Now, if there are no questions, I would like to ask you a question to both of you. It is about the reinvention of heritage, which is a trend that appears in many countries, in some countries, that are discovering heritage as an asset for not only for economic development, tourism, and so on, but also as a tool to reinforce the national identity. I would like to make an example, which is a bit paradoxical, but I was really embarrassed in a way. I'm talking of the Sharjah. There is a project, the Heart of Sharjah, which aims at the reconstruction of the urban fabric as it was 40 years ago. The urban fabric was completely demolished, totally demolished, replaced by a grid of streets. The main one is called the Bank Avenue, because it is a street with a building of 20 stories, buildings with banks and so on, which is now going to be demolished to reconstruct an urban fabric similar to the one that has been demolished. A similar process occurred in Doha, the reconstruction of the souk, not to mention the district of Bastakia in Dubai. Dubai has been applying for the nomination in the World Heritage List for that, not to mention the old city of Riyadh. What do you think about this process? Because it cannot be denied that the few cases that have been implemented are extremely successful in the end. My feeling is that they are like a theme park, like a sort of Disneyland, but maybe there is something more in that. There is not a simple attempt of commodification of heritage, but there is also an attempt to recreate a national heritage feeling. I don't know. I would like to hear your opinion about that. Do you think that these properties may be deemed of authenticity, for instance, in a way? In a way, they are authentic. They are authentic, how could I say, fake cities, fake monuments, fake architectural ensemble. In that sense, they are really authentic. They do not pretend to be the real one, the original one. But, I mean, it's a rather delicate story.
Yeah, I think that the evaluation of authenticity as well as of integrity, it depends on a mark that you establish to compare two situations across the time. If you are setting the mark point on the beginning of that urban setting, of course, it's gonna be inauthentic and not integer. It won't have integrity. But if we put that mark on the moment of its construction if it's related to the desire of the community, if it's related to yeah, it's a desire of the community. It's something that the people is claiming of. I think that this property, it gains a second kind of existence, and integrity and authenticity should be evaluated, consider this. Even let me think about an example. Even Las Vegas can be considered authentic if we are thinking about a construction of a city inside the desert and taking many external references to confirm its identity. So I think it depends on the mark at the moment that you are comparing integrity and authenticity.
Sure. Okay, there are two questions in the chat. So the first one is, I don't know who is asking, who is the attendees. I mean, the question is the following: as Yuka Ukilator stated, the international criteria for conservation cannot be taken as a template, but rather as a methodological framework. The universality of the theory of conservation approach to the critical recognition of the human cultural expressions of the past in their integrity and authenticity. I would like to ask the panelists for their suggestion on the recommendations to improve the current methodological framework.
It's a really, I'm sorry.
Yes, please. No. If you have an answer, please.
Oh, I think Yuka Ukilator gives us a really good clue for solving that problem. But the issue is to figure in the World Heritage List, the property have to meet one, at least, condition of exceptionality. And this is linked to the 10 criteria that is set on the operational guidelines. So we can use these terms and these concepts as a framework because the property have to meet the condition in a precise form. So unfortunately, the way of World Heritage System is structured, sometimes there is no space for this kind of further interpretation of the concepts.
Yes, indeed. Then there is a comment from YouTube from Antonia Hoyuela. The comment is the following: it is necessary to move from conservation to preservation, territorially and landscapely, and to understand the intervention on the cultural heritage and its updating and adaptation, not only in terms of use, but also in terms of contemporary artistic expression within the idea of palimpsest that Dina is proposing. It is very important to receive this message from Egypt, one of the kilns of the Mediterranean culture. Congratulations. Then there is, Dina unfortunately has lost the connection for a short while. I hope she's back. No, I don't see her back. Anyway, Rosanna, do you want to comment on this comment?
Yeah.
Especially about the fact that we have to move from conservation to preservation. This is also a very delicate issue because there are different interpretations of these two terms depending on the different regions of the world, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. In the USA, they use just preservation. In Europe, we can see the terms preservation and conservation. And depending on the country, these two terms are the same thing. But yeah. I would just highlight one thing about this question. I think it was especially addressed for Dina, but I would like to comment something about the landscape perspective. And when the cultural landscape emerged on the World Heritage System, it was in 1992, and it was a really powerful answer to some criticals that were being sent into UNESCO, that there was no balance between the cultural and the natural properties. And the cultural landscapes, it was an approach to inscribe that places that were characterized by like dynamic areas, ordinary sites. So it was a really powerful strategy to allow properties on the World Heritage List that couldn't have space before, like cultural monuments or like natural monuments. So I think that was a really good advance in electing cultural landscape as well.
Yes. Dina, are you back?
Yes, I'm sorry, I got a bit
No. Sorry.
disconnected. It seems the network was unstable. Yes, I think it, I mean, I lost the chat, but I think the question was from Monica, right? About how we could improve the current methodological framework, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, but there was also another one. I don't know if it wasn't from Monica. There is.
Yes, this one was from me.
Yes, that's what I thought as well. Yeah.
It was forwarded by Monica, but I don't know if she was if Monica made this comment. Anyway, yes, please go ahead.
Okay. So I'll get to that first. Yes, I think we do agree that we do need, we are talking about authenticity and integrity within the World Heritage circuit. Yeah. So between ICOMOS, IUC, and the World Heritage experts and so on. And I had this issue that when I use the term of authenticity, many people outside these circles, and even some when I give courses, capacity building courses on World Heritage, people don't understand what we mean by World Heritage. So, for example, we need to really compile the history, like Rosanna has done, of all the steps and the milestones. I tried to do that very briefly at the beginning, but you gave a really very good overview. I think we need to explain to the outside world and to those who are also involved in the process all these different milestones that happened. How did we reach the notion of authenticity and what we have today? So I think this is very important. The other thing is that I think in the operational guidelines, and I think this is linked not only to authenticity, but generally to the values, there should be a stress that those preparing the nomination dossier should talk and have a real dialogue, long-term dialogue, that allows for a proper understanding of the diverse values of the site. So I think this is something that we keep on talking about, but it's very important to really be incorporated, that all the different stakeholders, all the different interest groups get involved, because again, some very technical aspects, even linked to the material, heritage experts might miss because they have not been in discussion with certain art and architectural historians. Very often the opposite happens. The focus is on the materiality and very much is not discussed about the spirit and the feeling and so on, because people think that, oh no, but you know, let's say the monks say that it's like this, and there might be no evidence. The material is there, you see it, but the traditions and so on, they just are conveyed from generation to generation, and some people are afraid in the nomination files to put information that is controversial, while on the contrary, I think the richness is to show this diversity. So I think dialogue on the long term and really practical basis is necessary, and also as I noted in my conclusion, in an interdisciplinary manner. We need to open the discussion. We need to see how experts and community members outside the field think. So I think these are very practical things that that can be done through the World Heritage mechanisms if they are encouraged as such. I hope I
Yes.
answered a bit part of the question.
I think that what you said is absolutely true, and this is an important step that should be done, I think, in the World Heritage framework, to link the physical structure, the significance of the physical structure, to the intangible traditional meanings and significance, because very often these are the real value. They convey the real value of the heritage, and they explain the heritage status of a site, of a building, of a property, let's say. But unfortunately, the present system do not allow for that link, for instance. Only in few cases, only in the cases of, I don't know, some historical sites that are linked to some specific historic events or historic characters and so on. But it's true, what you said is absolutely true. I think that, for instance, it's very interesting the case of many archaeological sites. One considers that in reality, I mean, they're not really aware about the fact that historical excavation very often are the product of archaeological excavation are a totally artificial outcome. I mean, what you see is not really what existed. I mean, it's something that has been transformed, first of all, by the choice to dig in one place rather than in another. Second, by the process of conservation or the anastylosis which were made during the process of excavation and so on. And in many cases, think of the Stoa in Athens, for instance, are totally brand new buildings, absolutely new buildings. So as an Italian archaeologist puts out, archaeology is a matter of design. It's a matter of architectural and urban design in a way, even if there are dead stones or dead sites. And I think that this would help very much to widen the field of the authenticity and the integrity discussion. Anyway, I don't know if there are other. Yeah, there was an observation that it was important to understand the intervention on the cultural heritage and its updating and adaptation, not only in terms of use, but also in terms of contemporary artistic expression. No, I don't know exactly what it means, but well, okay.
No, I mean, if I may comment on what you said earlier, yes, I think every intervention, be it just even restoring, even removing layers of black soot, you know, from paintings, it's an intervention. But I think, and with every action we take, there is also a certain interpretation involved. But I think the problem is if we do not allow the information to be truthfully conveyed. If we become selective and we don't allow, we lose information in the process. Sometimes the conservator, while working on something that looks very authentic and it's not changed, they discover things, and their discovery might be the only option for people to know what really existed, for example, behind certain layers. and it's their intervention or the new technologies that we have today that would allow for us to convey this information. So I think any intervention or any either allows for the information to be properly conveyed or to be lost. And I think this is also linked to authenticity and to how do we understand the nature of the sites we are dealing with.
Yes, Rosanna, do you have to add something? Do you want to add something?
No, I agree with Dina. I think that it's really hard to use the qualifiers authenticity and integrity if we are not if we have not discovered properly what attributes are related to the value of the property. I have a good example. It was given by Hauskeller. I would ask excuse me for with his words, but he has a really good thought about this. Just a second. Oh, even a stone may gain integrity if there is someone around who contributes to an external point of reference. For instance, adopting an aesthetic point of view. The stone may be then perceived by virtue of its form, surface, structure, or color as beautiful, and in so far as being in ideal condition. So any change in the appearance of the stone will either destroy or diminish its beauty, or at least not enhance it, so that changing it will have posed at best an unnecessary risk. Or the stone may be perceived as ugly and hence as being far removed from the ideal condition, or as somewhere in between beauty and ugliness, and more or less far removed from the idea. If beauty or a design for beauty is our reference point, then the stone can be said to have or to lack integrity insofar in it is beautiful or ugly, respectively, or more precisely insofar as it is in a state conducive to the perception of its beauty or ugly. So we just can't use the authenticity and integrity when we have very clearly stated what are the attributes to be conserved, because the idea of value is an abstraction, it's a way we organize our thought. The intervention, it occurs on the specs, on the specific attributes. So we have to think authenticity and integrity related to these attributes that were valued on the nomination process.
Yes, indeed. Please, Dina.
I think somebody's asking if you could repeat again whose citation is this?
I can put the full reference on the chat. Just me. Just okay. It's Hauskeller. His book, it's about biotechnology and integrity of life. It's not about heritage, but I think it's really suitable for our discussion here. And I use it a lot, this reference on my PhD dissertation. It's a really good book. I will share it.
Okay. Well, I think that's all for the moment. Please, we will have a final wrap-up session. I hope you can participate. Don't remember, it should be the 23rd of June, I suppose. In any case,
25. 25.
25.
Yes.
Thank you, Monica. In any case, I think you will receive the invitation about that. And I think that the view you express in this very interesting debate will be summarized and reminded. For the moment, I thank you again for your very kind participation, for your very interesting presentations. I hope to see you soon in reality. I don't know when. And yes, because I'm really I think it's deadly. This kind of discussing and I mean, well, see you soon then, and all the best to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
also want to thank you both, Dina and Rosani, for these excellent discussions, and also Daniele to be our host today. So I put in the chat the links for the previous sessions, and I hope that you continue with us. Okay, there is another session that will begin today in a few
Two
moments.
other sessions, because I have to take part in another session on sustainability in
Oh wow!
1 hour.
Yes.
Well,
So yeah, there are a lot of activities. I hope that everyone is enjoying and
yes,
this opportunity to share our experiences and
yes,
different views. So
sure.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Monica. Thank you, Dina.
you.
Thank you,
Ciao,
Rosani.
Daniele.
Thank you, Vera. Thank you, Rubens.
Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.